whatever the data what we have compressed, so everything we are going to put in the table and we are going to display to the users. One of the great advantage of computer is that what? Its accuracy as well as speed. Suppose if the data is being drawn by the researcher himself, then what is the sources of data? Primary source will be the sources of data. So if we give just numbers, just the theory aspect, so it will be very difficult for the user to remember. Hello everyone, I am Harshita, lecturer, Department of Commerce, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. My dear students, today we are in the second session of Unit 5 of Business Research Method, and the Unit 5 is all about data analysis. So already we have discussed few of the concepts, so let us quickly recall what we have discussed in a previous session. In a previous session, I have covered this topic, that is, we had a brief introduction about this data analysis. So, what is the necessity? Why we are going to analyze the data? So, whatever the raw data which is being collected by the researcher, so it has to be processed into meaningful information. So, that stage is called as what? Data analysis, where the conversion of raw data into meaningful information. Next, we have learnt about steps in processing of data, where we have learnt about editing of data. Now, what do I mean by editing of data? The main purpose of editing takes place in order to identify the errors as well as omission of important information. So, that takes place under editing of data, that is to identify the errors as well as if there is any omission of important information. Next, we have learnt about coding of data, where each and every answers in the question, whatever the researcher wants to collect, so it has to be properly coded. So, it may be done before the collection of data, which is called as pre-coding, and after the collection of data, which is called as post-coding of data. Next one is classification of data. Based on some criteria, we have to classify those bulk data. So, based on some criteria, we are going to classify. So, the main intention of classification is in order to make the tabulation process very easier. So, the next process is your tabulation process, right? So, in order to make your tabulation process very easier, we have to classify the data based on some criteria. That is known as classification of data. And the next process was tabulation of data, what we are going to learn today, and we are going to learn about data diagrams. So, these are the two concepts what we are going to learn today. Now, we shall come to the concept, that is tabulation of data. Now, we have classified the data based on some criteria. Now, all that data what we have classified, that has to be presented in the form of table. So, that is known as what? Tabulation of data. So, through the presentation of table, it will be easy for the user to identify, or he will get a clear idea about the exact information if it is presented in the form of tables. Okay. So, that process is called as what? Tabulation of data. So, tabulation is a process of summarizing raw data and displaying in compact form by preparing the tables. So, whatever the data what we have compressed, so everything we are going to put in the table and we are going to display to the users, so that it will be easy for the users to understand. That presentation in the form of table is called as tabulation of data. So, tabulation of data is made for the further analysis, therefore, it is considered as an important step. So, if you have seen the research work, so all the information what the raw data which is being collected, so it will be presented by the researcher in the form of table, so that it will be easy to refer, at the same time easy to understand also. Tabulation may be by hand, so they can prepare the table by hand or through mechanical or electronic medias. So, by using the computers also they can prepare the table, or by hand also they can prepare the table. The size and type of the study, alternative cost, time pressure, availability of computers and computer program will determine the choice of tabulation. So, there are various factors which influence in preparation of table. So it may be depending upon the availability of computers. Suppose if the computers are not available, then by hand they have to prepare the table. And what is the cost incurred to prepare the table? So if the researcher himself is going to prepare, then no cost. He can easily prepare, but it is time consuming. So each and every aspect has to be taken into consideration while making this tabulation. So if the questionnaire are few in numbers and their length is short, hand tabulation is considered enough for tabulation. So suppose if the research work is too short and the number of tables that has to be prepared is very less, in that situation they can go for hand tabulation. Or if the tables are more and then they have to go for computer, so then they have to go for use of computer and prepare the table. So this is about tabulation of data. Hope you have understood. So tabulation means what? Whatever the data which is been classified, so it has to be put into the table. So it can be a hand tabulation where if the number of table is very less and he has sufficient time, then he can go for hand tabulation. If the number of tables that has to be prepared is more, okay, and the less time is there, then he has to go for computer. That is use of computer in preparing the table. During these years, applications of computer software have been increasing while tabulating the research data. The computer are said to be the essential. So, now what happens these days? Even though if the tables are very less, they go for computerized tabulation because there are number of software which are available, which are useful for the research work, where they can prepare number of tables. In a very less time, they can prepare number of tables. So these days, due to improvement in technology, they will go for computerized tabulation. Now let us see when they will go for computerized tabulation. So the first thing is as when the data is very large. So as I have already told you, so if the number of tables to be prepared is more, then hand tabulation cannot happen. Okay, so when the data is very large, by using the computer software, they can go for computerized tabulation. Next, the number of questionnaires are quite large. So if the number of questionnaires is quite large, then also he can go for computerized, because for each and every question, to analyze it properly, he has to prepare a table. So where this method is very suitable, that is computerized tabulation. The organizers undertake long-term projects for the research. So if the organization is undertaking long-term project, then the number of information which has to be collected will also be huge. In that situation, they can go for computerized tabulation. The information is to be required instantly, or it has to be produced instantly. In the sense, less time duration. Due to less time duration, they can't go for hand tabulation because it requires more time. Then they can go for computerized tabulation. The reliable and accurate results are expected. So whatever the table what we are going to prepare under computerized tabulation, so it will be accurate. So we know about one of the great advantage of computer is that what? Its accuracy as well as speed. Okay, so when the information that has to be submitted instantaneously, then they can go for this. And at the same time, so if we want reliable as well as accurate information, then computerized tabulation is suitable. So these are the few situations where the researcher goes for computerized tabulation. Next, let us see the next concept, that is part of a research table. So what are the parts? What are the main concepts what we have to remember while drawing a table? The research table consists of the following parts. So it should have a table number. Okay, suppose if I have drawn a table, so if I want to draw a table, so let us assume this is a table here with number of rows and number of columns. Okay, so now this is a table. So the first thing is that it should have a table number. So in order to segregate from one table to another table, it should have a table number. So let us take the table number 1. Okay, then title of the table. So we have to give a title here, that is title of the table. So what this table represents, that is title of the table. Next, captions. So here for each and every column, captions has to be given. So let us assume date, number of workers, amount of wages. So like that, the captions has to be given for each and every column. Next, stub. Stub in the sense what? The captions of each and every rows. So row heading is called as what? Stub. Now this is title and this is table number and these headings. So these headings for the columns are called as captions. Now this is caption. Okay, and these row headings are called as stubs. And these will be the body of the table. So rest everything what we are going to fill is body of the table and it should have a head note here. So head note and it should have a footnote. So which may contain source also. So source of the table can also be mentioned. So these are the important things or important parts that has to be considered in the table. So it should have a table number, it should have a title of the table which represents the whole table, then it should have the captions for each and every column, in the sense each and every column what it represents. Next, stubs, headings of each and every rows, what does each and every row identifies. Next, the information what has been filled inside, that is known as body of the table. Then it should have a head note and below it should have a footnote. And it also may contain source from where we have collected this table or from where the information is been collected. So these are the various parts of a table. Next, let us see what are the steps which are involved in preparing a table. So here we are going to learn everything about the tabulation. Okay, so let us see what are the steps which has been involved here. The following steps are necessary to prepare a table. So the first one is title of the table. So as I have already told you, the headings what we are going to give for the table which represents the whole table, that is known as title of the table. The table should include a brief, simple as well as clear title. So it should include what? Brief, simple and clear title which may express the basis of classification. So what the whole table represents, that has to be included in the title of the table, and the title of the table should be very brief, simple as well as clear. And the second is columns as well as rows. As we have already drawn here, it should contain columns as well as rows. So each table should include adequate number of columns and rows for easy understanding. Suppose if one column is missing, so we can't adjust in some other columns. So sufficient number of rows, sufficient number of columns has to be drawn. Suppose if the column is 7 and the rows has to be 6, then sufficient number of columns, sufficient number of rows has to be drawn so that clearly we can enter the data. Next one is captions and stubs. As we have already told you, so it should contain the column heading, at the same time row headings. So this column heading is called as captions and this row heading is called as what? Stubs. So the columns and rows should be given simple and clear captions as well as stubs. So it should contain simple caption as well as simple stubs. Next one is rulings. So column and rows should be divided by means of thick or thin rulings. So in the sense what? In order to differentiate from one column to another column and from one row to another row, a thick or thin rulings has to be drawn. Okay, so the table looks very neat. Next one is arrangement of items. So figures that can be comparable should be arranged side by side. So here, that is in the body of the table, whatever the contents which are there, so it has to be arranged properly. So arranged neatly. Suppose if one item is in the left, other in the right, so it doesn't look good. So everything has to be in the same order. Next one is, that is deviations. So deviation should be arranged in the column near the original data. So here the deviations has to be represented near the original data. Next, special emphasis. So this can be made by writing important data in bold or by special letters. Suppose if any of the concept that has to be given more importance, so in that situation it has to be mentioned in bold or it has to be mentioned with different colors so that it will be identified very easily. So these are the few steps in preparing a table. Next, unit of measurement. So the next step is that unit of measurement. It should be noted below the table very clearly. So on what basis the scale has been taken, whether it is 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter. So based on that we have to write the unit of measurement. Suppose if the measurement is in terms of kgs, then unit of measurement is kgs. If the measurement is in terms of rupees, that has to be mentioned clearly. Approximation made should be written below the lines. So as I've already told you, unit of measurement should be there. So it may be in terms of kgs, it may be in terms of rupees, or it may be in terms of hearts. So everything that has to be written carefully. Next one is footnote. Footnote is given below the table. So as I've already showed you, so footnote has to be written below the table. Next, sources of data. So this is also very important. Suppose if the data is being drawn by the researcher himself, then what is the sources of data? Primary source will be the sources of data. Suppose if the researcher have taken from some other source, that is secondary source. So he has to mention from where he has taken the information in order to draw that table. So whether primary or secondary should be shown below the table. So these are the few steps which are involved, or we can clearly tell that. So these may be included as a part also. So these are the few parts of the table which is included in the tabulation process. Next is features of table. Let us see what are the features of table, how a table should be. So the table used to show the data should possess the following features. Let us see what are the features here. The data should be simple and easy to understand. Of course, the main intention of preparing the data is to understand very simple as well as very easily. Next, the table should represent the equilibrium in its length as well as breadth. That means it should be attractive. So here I have already told you. So how the lines has been drawn. So it should be very neat with the same measurement. So suppose it is 1 centimeter, it should be 1 centimeter only. And it should be length as well as breadth should be same so that the table looks very neat. Next one, the data recorded in the table should enable easy comparison. The data in the table should be in such a way that it should be able to compare from one table to another, from one column to another column, from one row to another row. So like that the comparison should be very easy. The table should be free from errors. Of course, mistakes should not be there in the table. The table should not include abbreviations as far as possible. So there should not be any abbreviations which is written in the table. As I told you, it should be as simple as possible. So it should not include any abbreviations. The data of the table should be in integers, that is in whole numbers. So it should be in the form of integers, that is in terms of numbers it should be there. So these are all the features of table. Now coming to the last process of data analysis, that is data diagrams. So we have learnt about editing of data, coding of data, then classification of data, tabulation of data, and the last concept is what? Data diagrams. That is whatever which is there in the table that has to be represented in the form of diagrams. Okay. So in research, the data collected may be in the complex nature. So the main intention of data analysis is to compress the information, compress the huge information. So whatever we have represented in the form of table, that is in your earlier process, so that has to be represented in the form of diagram so that it will be much more easier for the user to refer the material. Okay. So diagrams and graphs is one of the methods which simplifies the complexity of quantitative data and make them very easily or more easily legible. So here, in order to make the complex data look very easily, so this data as well as diagrams, data diagrams and graphs will be used. So they represent dry as well as uninteresting statistical facts in the shape of attracting as well as appealing pictures. So instead, so if everything is in terms of context, everything which are there in terms of sentences, so it will be very bored to see, right? In order to make it so attractive, so these data diagrams as well as graphs will be used. So they have a lasting effect on the human mind than the conventional number. So if we give just numbers, just the theory aspect, so it will be very difficult for the user to remember. Suppose same information, same statistical data, it is been represented in the form of, or it is been presented in the form of graphs as well as charts. So it will be there in the mind for a longer period of time. So let us see what are the uses of graphs as well as diagrams here. So they help in presenting the quantitative facts in simple, clear as well as effective pictures. So as I've already told you, instead of just presenting the numbers in the form of tables or in the form of text, it will be very easy or it will be very attractive if we present in the form of pictures as well as diagrams. So they make the whole data readily intelligible. So in order to make it more interesting, so these diagrams will be used. So they can be used for comparison purpose. So we can compare the data from one diagram to another diagram. They are useful in analyzing complex economic theories. So if you have seen the economics, so if we want to know about demand and supply, so instead of learning the theory concepts, we can just go through the diagram so that we can clearly understand. In the same way, so these pictures and graphs will make us understand very easily. Next, they save much time in understanding the data. As I have already told you, so instead of going through the theory concept, if you see the diagram, it will be easily understandable. Facts can be understood without doing mathematical calculations. So no need of mathematical calculation, just if we see the data diagrams, we can understand the concept. They help in locating statistical measures such as median, quartile, mode, etc. So it will help us to identify the mean, median, quartile deviation, etc. So these are the few uses of diagrams, that is graph as well as diagrams. So in order to make our research works more simpler, we will use this data diagrams as well as graphs. Now let us see what are the types of graphs. So whatever the data which is being collected by the researcher in the form of table or tabular form, that has to be represented in the form of graphs or diagrams. So let us see what are the various types of graphs here. So we have, first one is charts or line graph. So we are familiar about it. Next one is bar charts. You might have seen bar charts where it represents the two variables. Okay, so bar charts. Next, circle charts or pie charts, we have seen about it. Next one is pictographs. So these are the few things or the few types of graphs. So we shall discuss in detail. So which are those? Charts or line graphs, bar charts, circle charts or pie diagram, pictograms. So these are the few types of graphs. Now let us see one by one what is this line graph or what is this chart. So coming to the first type, that is line graph. So you have learnt about it. So if you see the picture here, so here there are two axes, x-axis as well as y-axis. Now this is the x-axis, this is y-axis and this is center, that is O, which represents by O. Now this is x-axis and this is y-axis, and all the variations that takes place will be represented in the form of line. So here if you see the blue line here, so this represents one line, next is red one, pink one, yellow one. So these represents what? Variations. The changes in the variables which will be represented in the form of line. So that is known as what? Line graph. Now let us see, the line graph displays information in a series of data points that each represents an individual measurement or piece of data. So as I have already told you, the variation in the variables, so that will be represented in the form of line, that is known as line graph. So the series of points are then connected by a line to show a visual trend in data over a period of time. So those variations, so from one year to another year, so if they show the variations, that is known as what? Line graph. The line is connected through each piece chronologically. For example, following data shows birth rate per thousand of 6 countries over a period. So line graph. So if you see the picture itself, you'll come to know what is this line graph. The graph which represents in the form of line the variations in the variables which is represented in the form of line, that is termed as line graph. Now coming to the second type, that is bar charts. So what is this bar charts? If you see the diagram here, so this is known as what? Bar charts. Here also the variations in the variable which is represented in terms of bars. So these are known as bars, green one and yellow one. So they are known as bars and that is known as what? Bar charts. A bar graph is a common type of graph which consists of parallel bars or rectangles with lengths that are equal to the quantities that occur in the given data set. So it depends upon the variations how the bars will be. So here the bars will be in the form of rectangular shape which represents the variations of the variables. The bars can be represented vertically or horizontally. So here the bar can be represented vertically or it can be horizontally also. So it can be either horizontally or vertically. To show the contrast as well as recording information, bar graphs are used for plotting discontinuous or discrete data. Discrete data contains discrete values and are not continuous. So here the data will not be in the continuous form. So these are discrete forms. So here the data will be in discrete forms which will be represented in terms of bar charts. Next, third one is circle charts or pie diagram. So you might have seen about it. This is known as what? Pie diagrams, which will be in a circular shape where each and everything will be divided depending upon the variations of the variables. A pie graph is a circle divided into sections which each display the size of the relative piece of information. So here each and every size of that particular circle will be divided depending upon the piece of variation. Each section of the graph comes together to form a whole. So when you add all this, you will get the whole, but depending upon the variations, it will be divided. In a pie graph, the length of each sector is proportional to the percentage it represents. So here, what does it mean? Now here they have given 25, 20, 20, 20 and 15. So each represents the percentage. If you add all this, you will get 100%. And here they have divided into 25%, 15%, 20, 20 and 20%. Pie diagrams work particularly well when each slice of the pie represents 25 to 50% of the given data. Now, why this pie diagram is being used? For the easy representation, by using or by seeing the pie diagram itself, will come to know what is the percentage of variations that have taken place. Next one is pictograms. Now, let us see what is this pictograms. The pictogram, also called as pictogram or pictograph. So it may be pictogram or pictograph, is a diagram that conveys its meaning through its pictorial resemblance to a physical object. Now, how they are going to resemble there? So through this graph, how they are going to resemble? For example, green. Now, all the circles are in green. Okay, next is orange, all the circles are in orange. Next blue, all the circles are in blue. So here how it is going to be represented, they are going to use the real image. Suppose if it is in terms of fruits, then orange. So all the fruits, that is orange picture itself will be there. Suppose it is apple, then apple picture will be there. If it is bicycle, bicycle picture will be there. So here it resembles the actual object itself. That is known as what? Pictograms. So, pictographs are often used in writing and graphic system in which the characters are to be considered extant pictorial in appearance. So, based on the real picture, the pictures will be represented here. Pictography is a form of writing which uses a representational pictorial drawings. As I have already told you, so if it is aeroplane, then the aeroplane picture will be there. If it is bicycle, bicycle picture will be there. If it is car, car picture will be there. Now, if you see this diagram, so it is based on colors. So, each and everything is in the respective color. So, brown, purple, red is in red color, yellow is in yellow color, pink is in pink color, blue is in blue color, orange is in orange color, and green is in green color. So, for the easy reference, same object will be resembled through these graphs. So, it is a basis of uniform and to some extent hieroglyphic writing which also uses drawings as well as phonetic letters or determinative rhymes. So, now what you have to remember under pictograms or pictograph, the same picture will be there what it resemble the actual pictures. Okay, so that is known as pictograms. So, these are all types of graphs. So, my dear students, in today's session we have learnt about diagrams as well as all the things about tabulation. So, in my next session, I am going to discuss about the next concept, that is summary of data. So, how the summary of data has to be prepared. Next is univariate, bivariate as well as multivariate data and its analysis. And the last concept is interpretation. So, these are the last concepts of this particular unit. A small unit where you will have only 3 sessions. So, already we have discussed 2 sessions, and in my next session I am going to discuss the last session of this particular unit. So, my dear students, hope you have understood today's session. See you all in my next session with a new topic. Till then, take care. Thank you.